communication support for Japanese Red Cross. Plus, we are in constant contact with our delegations in Philippines, in Indonesia, in Suva, in Fiji for the Pacific Islands. And we are monitoring quite carefully what happens and predicting, or based on our witnesses and our networks on where to go and how widespread the action that we might need to implement is that we can prepare.
Okay, so now in addition to the monitoring that you're doing, any plans to move resources into specific areas around the Pacific?
At this stage, it's far too early to move anything that we have already in the stocks anywhere else. Knowing the situation, most likely over the weekend tomorrow, and then doing a more detailed assessments on the quick damages and so on. That's the base on the action. It's no worth not knowing numbers or scales of damages at this stage to move anything yet.
So the preparations that you'll be making right now, would they include things like emergency accommodation, things like tents, blankets, medicine, water?
We do hold certain stocks in here in Kuala Lumpur, up to 20,000 families, and then all over the national societies in Pacific, in Southeast Asia, they hold their own stocks for immediate response. So the Red Cross response starts from the field level. There are volunteers in those communities who start the evacuation with their authorities along the alerts. So our network starts immediately when there is a warning or prediction of something happening. And then internationally we will support their response operations where needed.
And have there been any appeals for help from any governments or any organizations or bodies at all?
Not yet.
Okay. All right, sir. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Our correspondent Marga Ortigas is in the Philippines capital, Manila. Philippines has also issued a tsunami warning. Let's get the latest from Marga. Marga, what's the latest you can tell us about this warning that we heard about earlier on?
Yes, indeed. We've had local officials just speaking to the public here across the media, trying to reassure them that as much as this tsunami alert has been issued, it is really more a precautionary, or rather a preemptive measure. They have issued a mandatory order for the thousands of residents that live along the eastern and northern coastlines of this archipelagic nation to basically evacuate to higher ground. Now, these areas are also quite used to dealing with the forces of nature. It's the typhoon belt. It's where most of the tropical cyclones that come across the country first hit. So they are used to these measures, and they have designated areas where they are expected to seek shelter, at least until government officials say it's all clear to return to the coastline. Now, as it is, between now and at least another 2 hours is when they have said that they expect the tsunami, if it does hit this area, to come towards land in the Philippines. They have said that the waves are expected to be at least a meter high, or for water levels to rise that high, and it could cause some damage, but they're saying they don't expect it to be deadly. Definitely not as deadly as what was seen previously in the Indian Ocean in 2004. However, they are saying that residents are to remain in these areas that have been designated safe at least for the next few hours.
So, Marga, what kind of preparations would the Philippines government have made in expectation of this wave coming ashore?
Well, they seem to be taking quite a firm step by already telling the police and the military to help in terms of manpower. They are working with local government officials to make sure that these coastal areas are indeed bereft of people at this point as we speak, and to make sure that all the villagers are safe on higher ground. They say that there is no need yet to prepare for food or indeed shelter for much longer than a few hours. They have already said that they are assuring the public that they can go back to their coastal villages in the next 3 hours.
And these coastal villages that you're talking about, are these densely populated areas?
Yes, they are quite populated. You've got thousands of fishing villages here, as well as farmers that have made their living really from the land that are usually at the foothills of mountains that face out to the ocean. And indeed, one of the provinces, Albay, is known here as one of the most disaster-prone and indeed also disaster-ready. It's where Mayon volcano is, and a few years ago it saw a devastating death toll there when a landslide came together with a volcanic eruption as well as a devastating typhoon. So these are areas that are also quite used to being told by the government that disaster could potentially be on its way, and they should prepare themselves just in case.
Marga, you know, we heard earlier on from Steph Varson, who's our Jakarta correspondent, and she was saying that one of the difficulties that the Indonesian government faces is that many of the people who could be affected by a tsunami live in very remote areas. They're isolated. It will be very difficult to get a warning to them. Would the Philippines experience a similar kind of problem?
There would be certain areas that might be a little more difficult to reach, but for the most part, all of these coastal villages, many of these provinces that are along the coastlines of the Philippines have already been directly contacted by the national government. They have also been speaking on local radio. We have heard from most of the governors of these provinces. They have not just assured the greater national public, but they have also basically said that they have directly made contact with the local leaders of these affected villages. So they are quite confident that they are ready for any eventuality. They, of course, hope that nothing really, really terrible happens in the meantime.
All right, thanks, Marga. Marga Ortigas there talking to us from the Philippines. Now, the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center says the first wave will hit Indonesia at 10:57 GMT. That's in just about 45 minutes' time. Aljazeera Step Varson is in Jakarta with the latest there. Step, about 45 minutes away, and this wave could hit parts of Indonesia. What kind of preparations are underway?
Yes, the authorities are still saying that a small tsunami can hit Indonesia within the next hour. The areas that are under threat basically are the eastern islands in Indonesia, which is Papua, Maluku and northern Sulawesi. The first island to be hit is probably Papua. What we're hearing from there is that there's not been a real strong warning. We haven't heard from the local authorities at all. The military has told me that they're now having put this warning system in place. They're going to call all the military headquarters there, who have also to call the smaller military positions over there, and those people have to go actually literally to the beach to warn the people to stay away from the areas. So it's a difficult process, and what I'm hearing now is that lots of people are actually going away from the beaches because they're hearing it from other sources that the tsunami might hit soon, and not from the government itself. It's a different story a little bit in Manado, which is in the North Sulawesi. There have been sirens heard to warn the people there. Also, the local authorities are more alert, it seems, there to warn people to get away from the beaches. But they also say it's only going to be a small tsunami when it's going to hit. But they're, of course, worried about damage. There's lots of fisher villages there, lots of boats, fishing boats, who are very costly for the people there, that could be broken. So they have told these people to take those boats ashore. But overall, it's a very different picture than what we're hearing from the Philippines.
Would preparations for an emergency of this kind have extended to the government planning to accommodate people, putting in tents into places where they could accommodate people once they move into higher ground, move away from the coast?
Well, nothing so far has been done at all. Nobody has come out on local television to actually warn the people very strongly. Haven't heard anyone really strongly warning people on the radio either. So it's basically people in the center of Jakarta calling to the local district to warn the people, and they have to warn these people on their term. But the problem is it's a remote area. There's lots of islands there. There's lots of beaches there where people live. There's hardly any communication. There's no radio communication, hardly any mobile phone contact. So it's very difficult to reach these people.
Okay, thanks, Step Varson. They're talking to us from Jakarta. And of course, just to reiterate that the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center says that the first wave will hit Indonesia at 10:57. That's just under 45 minutes from now. We'll be watching events there closely and monitoring the latest. You're watching Al Jazeera's